the end times. It feels like we are living through a dying empire, and a dying empire is always going to do a lot of violent things in its last breath. So that's what all of this instability actually is. I think America is trying to desperately pack up the entire Middle Eastern region finally, and that is going to, of course, be a tremendously bloody affair.
So, President Trump, the peacemaker, from where you're sitting, how is that going?
It's definitely not going great. I mean, I never really believed that Donald Trump was actually going to be a peacemaker. I have a firm commitment to the theory that American foreign policy is uniparty. That's part of the reason why you're hearing Brett McGurk and even someone from the Kamala Harris campaign as recently as last week talk about how they are either directly aligned with Donald Trump in terms of how hard they would defend Israel, or even trying to outflank Donald Trump in terms of how fast they would defend Israel, even though Israel has conducted this first strike against Iran amidst this Iran denuclearization negotiations that are ongoing. So yeah, Donald Trump was also a liar when he said he was going to end these wars. He said day one, Israel-Palestine, it's over. Day one, Ukraine, Russia, it's over. Now, of course, with respect to dealing with foreign adversaries like Russia, that's a sovereign nation. It's a lot more difficult than to actually cause Israel to stop its ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza. Israel is not only a client state, but Israel is basically an extension of American foreign intervention in the region. It's basically an American state. We give 70% of all the defensive and offensive weapons to Israel since October 7. Israel would not be able to do this ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza without our go-ahead and our knowledge and our munitions and our political cover. And Donald Trump could have, quite literally could have, stopped this at any moment, just as Biden had the same opportunity to stop this with one simple phone call, and he chose not to do so. So it's not surprising that Trump has used this negotiations process, this denuclearization agreement negotiations process, where the American envoys have pushed for maximalist positions, claiming that Iran cannot have any nuclear capabilities at all for civic power grids, that Iran cannot enrich any uranium whatsoever. And then using that negotiations process to allow Israel to have some kind of shelter, some kind of cover to tactically strike first amidst these ongoing negotiations. That doesn't seem like a peaceful negotiator at all. I think America is showing the world over and over again, just like with what Steve Witkoff did with Hamas, as they cut a backdoor deal with Hamas to release American-Israeli occupying force soldier Edon Alexander, with nothing but just assurances that America would potentially be a better party to deal with than Israel. We keep refusing to follow through on our commitments and showing every other party in the region that we are unstable, we're dangerous, and we're just as violent as Israel is.
But how does that fit with the MAGA mantra of America first? There was this campaign pledge to put domestic interests before all other interests. Is that compatible with this hawkish picture you're painting of a US that's still playing its hand in regime changes overseas?
I mean, it's just lying. I don't know how else to describe it. Politicians lie all the time, and Donald Trump clearly is a tremendous liar. He lies every waking moment of every single day. And yes, the supposedly isolationist policies that the Donald Trump administration was supposed to implement, that never came to fruition in the first term. He was in isolation in the first term, even though he falsely presented his record as not starting any new wars, even though he bombed the Middle East in spectacular fashion, greatly escalated even Obama's drone wars, as a matter of fact, which was shocking because Obama was the drone king, and yet he still presented himself as a peaceful dove, as he did in 2016 successfully against Hillary Clinton. He presented himself once again as a peaceful dove after years of conflict under the Biden administration. He said he was going to be the reasonable guy who comes in, the peaceful dove who comes in and actually finally puts an end to all these endless wars. And now we are saber rattling against a regional power that America and Israel both have salivated at the prospect of dismantling for the past 30, 40 years at this point. And I do feel like, judging by the statements coming from Israeli officials, this is their final battle, the final step in America's grand design in the region. It would have happened with every other president as well. Maybe not in the same exact ways. I think Donald Trump has a different style and a different way of speaking, where he's more blunt, he's more honest about America's ambitions. In many instances, there's a brutal honesty to the cruel way in which he speaks about America's allies and America's adversaries, America's enemies. But when it comes down to it, yeah, he lied to his voters about being an isolationist. There's no isolationist American presidency. There's no anti-war party in this country. There's no anti-war party. There are very few real anti-war politicians in this country. I think the military-industrial complex is far too powerful for that. And I think imperialism is far too important as a mechanism to continue capitalism. And America is the defender of global capitalism, finance capitalism, and imperialism is a necessity under that structure.
Okay, so no such thing as an anti-war presidency and no such thing as an anti-war party in America. What about the American people? Do they want war?
Yes and no. I think a lot of Americans don't actually understand that endless war is a part of the reason why we get to have cheap oil and numerous other benefits, as opposed to like how poor the material conditions and living standards are in the global South. That's the brutal truth of it all. But it's good that Americans don't recognize that, because if they did, I think a lot more would be salivating for additional war. Americans fancy themselves to be anti-war for the most part. And the reason why is because they don't like seeing coffins draped with the American flag. And therefore, war is a constant, but it's just constantly happening over there. It's not happening to us over here. America has tremendous proximity from the impact of these wars as well. Part of the reason why we were so dominant after World War II, because our factories and our robust industrial base was not destroyed, was not eviscerated. So because of that proximity, our media, and because our media is constantly justifying endless war, we get to basically have our cake and eat it too. Americans get to feel like they want to be peacekeepers. They feel like they have to be the world police, but also simultaneously they get to talk about how little appetite they have for war, which is why they vote for a guy like Donald Trump, who presents himself falsely as a peaceful dove, as an anti-war candidate. Having said that, how much of that is honest, I don't know. I think we're a very malleable population. We're very easy to do, very easy to influence. And therefore, I think all it would take is for Trump to come out and be like, America first actually means Iran can't have nuclear weapons. No country can be sovereign. And that means like we have to send some corn-fed boys from Nebraska on a cruiser to potentially get destroyed by Shahed drones. That's what America First means to me now, and that's what America First is going to mean to a lot of people tomorrow. So who knows? Who knows how well he'll be able to sell it? But I think we are a very heavily propagandized nation. There's a lot of nascent and reactivated Islamophobia in this country, especially Islamophobia that had a real consequential go at it in terms of propaganda since the war on terror, since 9/11. And I think we've reactivated that nascent Islamophobia since October 7, 2023 here in this country. So I think that Americans will still, at the end of the day, find a way to say, no, it's actually fine if we bomb Iran. On that front, actually, I will say we've been bombing Yemen. The American government continued Operation Prosperity Guardian, basically. It exchanged hands from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. Tremendously costly, tremendously murderous, Once again, completely illegal. We're just violating the sovereignty of a foreign nation, this time Yemen. It's almost a ritual at this point. Every president has to bomb Yemen. And that was not even talked about in American media. The only thing that they talked about is like why they revealed that they were going to bomb Yemen to a journalist, who I say journalist in air quotes. He's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. He's a Hosberist and also a propagandist for the State Department. But like that was Signalgate. That was the real point of contention. No one was asking like, why are we bombing Yemen? Why is Donald Trump bombing Yemen? What's happening? I thought he was anti-war. What's going on? And I think Americans think, oh, we just have to bomb these other countries all the time. So I think like as long as there's no like boots on the ground invasion, I do think that if America was engaging in like limited striking with its Air Force, as the New York Times, CNN, Fox News, and every outlet is currently fantasizing about with respect to bombing Fordo, the deep underground nuclear facility in Iran. That is only penetrable with American weapons, as far as we know. If they were to do that, I think maybe they could sell it as not really an act of war in the absence of boots on the ground, military invasion in Iran. So that's, I think, what we're gearing towards right now. And there will be a lot of right-wing Trump supporters that will gladly get on board. And I think more importantly than right-wing Trump supporters that will gladly get on board, you'd be shocked at the number of Democrats who will be on board with Trump doing what must be done. I'm not really, liberals saying things like, I'm not really pro-war, but what Donald Trump is doing is defending Israel. And Israel is an incredibly important ally. It's the only moral country in the world in the Middle East, and the only democracy in the Middle East. And Iran is horrible to women, so we have to kill all the women in Iran with American troops. Like that is totally a liberal point of propaganda that I can see from American political commentators and writers, journalists alike. We've already started seeing it.
Now, it is true that, as you say, aggression played out by the American military is often happening abroad. However, there are currently Americans in America who are facing the might of state power. You are, of course, streaming from LA, where there have been almost 2 weeks of protests. The president sent in thousands of Marines and military to squash unrest. He's so far failed to shut it down. As we approach 2 weeks, are things settling? How does this end?
This has been a spectacular escalation as opposed to the first administration, where it's very obvious that the Trump administration is basically punishing blue states and blue cities just for being Democrats and for being liberals and being progressive. The ICE apprehensions and ICE detentions aren't born out of a real issue that we must solve. It's the entire purpose of it is to, from their perspective, is to combat crime. Undocumented migrants are not responsible for a higher percentage of crime per capita than natural-born U.S. citizens are. They do less crime. They're constantly worried about potentially being deported, so it makes sense. They do significantly less crime, as a matter of fact. So the idea, the entire notion of mass deportations is built on a lie that the Democrats never actually counter-messaged against, which was very frustrating to watch. And now there's even more evidence that it's a lie, because Donald Trump is not going after these supposed criminals. They're going to places of work. They're going to factories. They're going to the farms. And they're doing dragnet campaigns on farmhands. They're doing dragnet campaigns on people who are playing a formative role in American commerce, in agricultural production, in construction. And this is very disruptive to the economy, as people had predicted already, myself included, beyond the incalculable human toll and the inhumanity of it all, right? It's because it's depraved to just rip people away from their families and black bag them and possibly ship them off to a slave labor colony in El Salvador named Sicat. They're doing this purely out of spite, and they're doing this purely to satisfy the needs of a white nativist 20% of their voter base that's like really excited at enacting any kind of like racial justice that will make them feel more superior, that will make them feel better, all as a mechanism of distraction that like these guys and their living conditions are getting worse and worse year over year. But as long as like the government is actually fighting for this interest that they've created for me by punishing undocumented migrants, someone that's lower than me, I maybe have it better than I ever would under a Democratic leadership. That's the calculation for a lot of these people. Donald Trump came out and said, after Steve Miller said we need 3,000 kidnappings a day, and the ICE deportations greatly escalated after that in Los Angeles. They went to Home Depot in a predominantly Latino neighborhood, and they went to a warehouse as well in the fashion district downtown. Again, lots of Latino workers. They arrested a union leader, the largest union, SEIU is the largest union in California. They arrested the leader, and they're charging him with some ridiculous charges. And they're doing all of this, I guess at this point, 2 weeks ago. And they're doing this simply to prove a point. The idea that like, you know, they are actually very militant against like dealing with this undocumented migration problem, even though no one in California would ever tell you that undocumented migrants are a problem at all. These are people who are, you know, parts of our communities. They're a part of the social fabric here. They're a part of what makes California great, part of what makes Los Angeles awesome. And so of course people got very upset. And then last week, Donald Trump came out and said, actually, we should roll back the apprehensions that ICE is doing at places of business like hospitality industry and also the farms, because business leaders reached out to Trump and were like, what are you doing? You're disrupting our output. You're disrupting commerce. You're not supposed to do this. What are you doing? Stop, you know, detaining my workers. So Donald Trump said, let's pull it back. Well, I thought these guys were all criminals. If they're criminals, why are you going to the courts? If they're criminals, why are you going to the immigration courts and waiting outside of the immigration courts for a guy who is attending his court date because his immigration status is in limbo? If they're criminals, why are you, putting a mask on your face and not even explaining that you're actually a cop, or lying about having a warrant when you only have an administrative warrant but not a judicial warrant, when you want to do an unlawful search and seizure to dupe people into opening their doors for you? If these guys are criminals, why are you going to the graduations of schools to kidnap children? Why are you trying to go to elementary schools to kidnap children so you can hopefully maybe kidnap their families, like use them as bait? I think the real criminals here is this administration. They are a criminal administration. The way that they're behaving is insane. It's identical to Nazi Germany. And apparently they get really touchy-feely about that when you call ICE Gestapo, but that's precisely what they're doing. And now Donald Trump has said he wants to escalate the deportations only in blue states and blue cities. But I thought these Republicans, the people that voted for Donald Trump in red cities, voted for him because they wanted to get these criminal migrants out. So why is he only getting these quote unquote criminal migrants out in blue cities? Because everybody understands that there is no real problem with undocumented immigration in this country. The real problem with undocumented immigration in this country is that they are simply not being processed, cleared, and authorized as expeditiously as they should be. That's the only problem. The real crime here is the fact that we use and abuse this permanent underclass of laborers without actually offering them the proper clearance, while keeping their immigration status in limbo, because that way they're more malleable and they're easier to discard. And the Trump administration is now using them as a pawn to make a political point, and it's gross and it's disgusting. If that wasn't the case, they'd be deporting undocumented migrants in red states as well. As a matter of fact, they'd probably focus on the red states first. Florida and Texas are the two largest red states with the number of undocumented population beyond California, Illinois, New Jersey, and New York. So why is he not doing these apprehensions in California and in Florida and Texas? Why is he not actually going after Florida and Texas? Because, he knows that this is an unpopular position.
Hasan, you're absolutely right. It is important to highlight misinformation around migrant crime, and studies in the US show that immigrants are consistently 60 to 50% less likely to be incarcerated than US born. However, as you've indicated, the rhetoric Trump is using has expanded from demonizing undocumented migrants. In the case of LA, he's now describing entire communities, entire populations as criminals. We've seen words to describe the LA protests like riots or insurrection. We're being told that LA is a war zone. You have been on the scene. Are these descriptions accurate?
I mean, I'm in Los Angeles right now, and I live here. I love the city. It's a massive city. So the idea that like the entire city is a war zone is so ridiculous. I mean, this city is larger than larger than some countries even, right? So no, it's a tiny, minuscule part of Los Angeles, in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, where there's any sort of like instability whatsoever. It's not riots. It's not like a war zone. That's all completely made up. It is overwhelmingly peaceful. And it's overwhelmingly peaceful until the police escalate, until police start, brutalizing the protesters, shooting them with rubber bullets, and shooting them with tear gassing them, macing them. I've experienced this every single time I've been out. We walk up, it's a perfectly peaceful protest. People are demonstrating outside in front of a police line, and then the cops decide it's time. And, they take the batons out and they start brutalizing people. And of course, in the process of that brutalization, like, do some people get mad and maybe throw a bottle of water, like a half empty bottle of water they picked off the ground, against the cop with riot gear on? Sure, it does happen. But that's nothing. If that's something that you can get mad at, then you should be extremely upset at the fact that these guys that are paid for by taxpayers are using chemical weapons and have all the gear that the taxpayers paid for, and using chemical weapons that we paid for on us for exercising our First Amendment rights. It's completely ridiculous. Like the asymmetry is so glaringly obvious. If you're there, you see it. That's precisely why I go to these protests, and that's precisely why I film them. I don't want to be beyond the police line, as mainstream press usually is, because I feel like it reflects their position a little bit differently, and it I think shows people a very different reality of what these protests actually look like, as opposed to being on the opposing side and maybe even sometimes getting shot with stun grenades, with flashbangs and tear gas, as I have. But it's important to show that these protests are peaceful until police escalate, and even then it's not like anything crazy. I mean, I ate a bunch of tear gas. I got flashbanged the first day, and I walked like 3 blocks and went to Little Tokyo to eat ice cream after the protest was over, right? So that's not, you can't say that like riots are taking place in Los Angeles on fire if I can just like get into an Uber and go home, or if I can just like walk 3 blocks down, like literally 3 blocks, not that far away, and go and enjoy a nice ice cream from a Japanese store called Somi. Like, that's not, it's a little bit different, I think.
Yeah.
And there is no need for the Marines to be deployed, nor the National Guard. But of course, that's just, once again, for pure politics.
Nevertheless, from the outside, it seems to be a fairly volatile climate in the US, and there are cases where political unrest leads to acts of criminal violence. This weekend saw 2 more political assassinations in a string of assassinations. Protests have spread across 50 states, and now in the midst of all this is the question about whether the US is about to go to war with Iran. How does it feel to be in the US at the moment?
I mean, it's chaotic. It's the end times. It feels like we are living through a dying empire, and a dying empire is always going to do a lot of violent things in its last breath. So That's what all of this instability actually is. I think America is trying to desperately come to terms with the reality that it is no longer going to be the hegemonic superpower, that China has become a true global competitor and is slated to continue growing. And I think in that process, we're trying to do to the best of our ability. We here in the United States are trying to pack up the entire Middle Eastern region finally. And that is going to, of course, be a tremendously bloody affair. And that's what's unfolding right now. We're just getting our ally or getting our extension in the region, Israel, to do tremendous damage. And hopefully, from the estimation of the State Department, of course, it's not my assessment, but the State Department hopes that they can potentially destabilize Iran enough and then maybe even implement a puppet state there so that they can move on to decoupling this oil-rich region from China as a major energy provider, so that they can weaken China's position around the globe.
End times. Hasan Piker, thank you for joining us here on Middle East Eye.
Thank you for having me.